Welcome to the Traveling Flaneur podcast, where I'll talk about the economy, politics, history, and culture of the places I've visited. I'll also give you travel tips, recommend places to visit, things to do, and the best food. The life of a flaneur is that of an observer, a person who wanders aimlessly with eyes always open to any opportunity. It is a person who is in no hurry and prefers the journey over the destination. I believe that in this hurried world we live in, we need more flaneurs, and I hope you enjoy the perspective from a traveling flaneur and maybe become one in your next trip. Hi, and welcome to Vancouver, the third largest city in Canada. During all of my past episodes, I was telling you all about the most famous parks in Canada, and to explore all of them, I recommend that you should start and end your trip in Calgary. And Calgary is one of the important cities in the Canadian West Coast, but if you're already in this area, there is also another of the cities that you should definitely explore, and it is Vancouver. So this city is probably one of the most beautiful in the entire world for its landscapes because it will combine mountains with beaches and with very modern architecture. And not in vain, it is consistently considered as one of the top 10 cities to live in the world. Apart from its beauty, Vancouver is also a very important city economically because it has the largest port in North America and it is also the hub of tech in Canada. And I think both of these things are greatly benefited from the proximity of Vancouver to Asia and also to California. Another thing that's important about this city is that it's very green because it has over 200 parks and even it has one park that is bigger than the Central Park in New York. So all of these are things that make it one of the most important cities in North America. But the only bad thing about it is that in recent years, Vancouver has increased the number of people that are living on the streets, partly because the climate is less cold in this city than in other Canadian cities, but also mainly because there's a huge drug addiction problem, which has made the insecurity in the streets worse. In particular, there's a street called Hastings Street that is full of people that's addicted to drugs like fentanyl, which turns them into real living zombies, and that's why it is no longer recommended to visit some areas like Chinatown or Gastown, especially at night. In today's episode, I'm going to give you a list of all of the things that you can do around this city, and oddly enough, my first recommendation would be to visit one of these neighborhoods that I was just talking to you about it, and it's Gastown, but of course my recommendation would be visiting it throughout the day, and again, avoiding Hastings Street, because this neighborhood is still worth it. Gastown is one of the oldest areas in all of Vancouver, and it has cobblestone streets and also Victorian-style buildings, so it is definitely a good place to visit. The main attraction of this neighborhood is going to be the famous steam clock, which is a clock that it's going to expel steam every 15 minutes. This is a quite particular clock, and there are only 6 other steam clocks in the entire world, so I think this is one of the places that's one of the favorite for tourists, and you should definitely be adding it to your visiting list in Vancouver. Another popular neighborhood in Vancouver is one that's called Yaletown, which resembles a little bit the meatpacking district in New York. But if you've never been to the meatpacking district, basically it's just an area that was initially very industrialized and it was full of stores and factories, but it was gradually modernized and adapted into rather a hipster style. And today, this place is full of bars, cafes, restaurants, and stores, and all of this is in the industrial architecture and brick buildings that were from long time ago. Nearby, you'll also find an attraction that's called the 374 Engine Pavilion, and here is where they have the first passenger locomotive that arrived in Vancouver in 1887. Admission is free, so I would recommend it, and you can also climb into the engine room and just see how this train used to look like. The next place that you should visit is the largest park in the city, the one I was telling you about earlier that's bigger than Central Park, and this is called the Stanley Park. This park has over 4,000 square kilometers of green areas, beaches, and trails for walking, jogging, or cycling. So the park is going to connect downtown Vancouver with North Vancouver through the iconic Lions Gate Bridge. The best plan that you could do over here is rent a bike and ride along the Seawall Path, which is going to be a 10-kilometer trail that surrounds the park and will offer you spectacular views of the city, the coast, and the mountains. And I would suggest riding this path in a counterclockwise direction. You can also explore some of the beaches over here like Third Beach and Second Beach, as well as the Lost Lagoon and Beaver Lake. In this park, you will also find a very popular attraction that it's my fourth recommendation to visit in Vancouver, and it's the aquarium. This aquarium is going to be very large and it has many marine species, including otters, penguins, whales, and jellyfish. It is also a place that's important for research and conservation, but the only bad thing is that it's a little bit expensive. It costs between $41 and $56 approximately your ticket. And I don't know exactly how this algorithm works, but I think it's related to the dates. So you could try booking your ticket in advance and maybe you will be able to get cheaper tickets. Apart from the aquarium, I think Vancouver also has several museums that are also recommended to visit. The most popular of all is going to be the Museum of Anthropology, or as people know it there, the MOA. This museum is in the campus of the University of British Columbia, and it is a museum that's going to explain the indigenous cultures of the region. So its exhibits will include totem poles and sculptures from the First Nations of British Columbia. There is also the Science Museum in case you want to see its extinctive dome, or if you're more of an art person, you can also visit the Vancouver Art Gallery. There is a very particular museum, and I would say it's even a curious museum, which is called the Vancouver Police Museum. This one is located in the old building where the autopsies of murders were performed, and you will have the chance to see rooms with confiscated firearms, counterfeit currency, or exhibits with the most horrible crimes in Vancouver's history, or even the old morgue. So the autopsy room. For anyone that's looking into strange museums, this one is definitely one of them. So be sure to check it out if you like all of those weird things, and let me know in the comments what you thought of it. After all of these museums, my sixth recommendation is going to be visiting English Bay, which is one of the most famous beaches in Vancouver, and it is ideal for relaxing during the summer months. It is also the perfect place if you want to watch a sunset. But when you go, don't forget to stop by the bronze statues known as the Amazing Lauder, which are a set of giant figures that will definitely bring a smile into your face. There also you will find what is called the Inukshuk, which is the symbol of the Canadian Inuit. And since we're talking about beaches, there's another recommended beach that you should visit, and it's called Kitsilano Beach, or as locals would call it, the Kits Beach. And this is going to be the ideal place to enjoy a sunny day. This neighborhood is also famous for its relaxed atmosphere, and it has many cafes, restaurants, and stores nearby. And it is said that the sunset here is one of the most beautiful in Vancouver. So bring a blanket and be prepared to enjoy the view because it's definitely going to be worth it. The eighth place that I would recommend visiting is one of the iconic buildings of the city that it's called the Canada Place. Some say that it reminds them of the Sydney Opera House, which I don't know, but the building is shaped like a sailboat and it has white fabric peaks, and that's why it is so particular. Here you can take a stroll, watch some of the seaplanes take off, or also even watch the cruise ships that are departing to Alaska. What is for sure is that this building is an icon of the city, so you should go there and take one of the famous photos in the Canada Place. Then, my next recommendation would only apply if you go to Vancouver during the spring, because in April there are going to be some parks that are full of cherry trees, and this is a spectacle to see. You might know all of these trees as the cherry blossoms, or you might have also heard about them as Sakura. But basically these are all of the trees that have the pink flowers that are beautiful, and although many people associate them with Japan, you can get to see these cherry blossoms also in Canada, especially in Vancouver or in Toronto. In Vancouver, there are over 40,000 cherry trees, but the bad thing about this is that cherry trees usually last very short in the blossom part, and they only appear during the last weeks of March and the first weeks of April, and after this flower appears, it will last for around 2 weeks. But if you have the opportunity to visit Vancouver during this time, you should go to 3 places to check it out. You can go to Queen Elizabeth Park, the Botanical Garden, or the Nitobe Memorial Garden. Also, if you visit during those dates, the Cherry Blossom Festival in Vancouver will be taking place. So you can, of course, go to that festival, you'll see the cherry blossoms, and you'll also see some activities related to these flowers. And well, my last recommendation in Vancouver would be to go to its viewpoints. The most famous one is going to be the Vancouver Lookout, because this one gives you a 360 view of the city. The entrance will cost you around $18 and you can book your ticket online. But if you don't want to spend money on looking into these views, another free option that you can use is going to the public library, and in the top floor you'll find that there is a terrace that also gives you good views. Of course, they're not going to be as good as the Vancouver Lookout because it's not as tall and it's not 360, but it's a good place to watch some good city views if you don't have a budget or if you don't want to spend that much money in a viewpoint. So all of these things, I think that you could do them in about 2 days, but if you can stay longer, I would recommend it because you can take some other smaller trips to visit places that are surrounding Vancouver, and I think they are totally worth it. The first place that you should visit would be the Vancouver Island, which is a very close island that's accessible by ferry, and it is very beautiful. This island, you'll see that it's quite large and it has parks such as the Pacific Rim National Park or the Strathcona Provincial Park, which are ideal for exploring nature, but most people just go to a city that's called Victoria. And Victoria is actually the capital of British Columbia, and it has a very pretty Victorian architecture. It has gardens and it has the iconic Parliament of BC. So if you visit Vancouver during May and September, I would highly recommend it going into Victoria. Also, because from here you can take a trip in order to do a whale watching tour. And most of these tours are going to be departing from Victoria. The main species that you can see are going to be orcas, humpback whales, gray and minke whales, as well as maybe other animals like dolphins or sea lions. I recommend that you book this tour in advance, especially if you plan to visit during the high season, because you might find a lot of people trying to book these tours. And another tip would be choosing a tour that is certified by the Wildlife Safe Watching to make sure that they are following all the animal protection standards. My next recommendation would be taking a day trip into Capilano Bridge Park, which is north of Vancouver. And here is where the famous suspension bridge is, because it's called the Capilano River. And then over there, 75 meters on top of it to be specific, you'll find a suspension bridge that is 137 meters long. This is a year-round attraction, and it will also feature a series of suspension walkways and a forest with century-old trees. But the bad thing is that this is super touristy, so avoid weekends, and if you can't go early, you should, so you can enjoy all of the views without being swamped by people. Another bad thing about this, it's the cost, because it is expensive. You need a ticket to go over this bridge, and it will cost you around $70 per person. And you have to get there as well, so it will not be a very cheap plan. If you would like to try another suspension bridge, but that is free, I recommend that you visit the Lynn Canyon Park. This park is going to be located in north of Vancouver as well, and it also has a suspension bridge and some hiking trails through the forest, but the good thing is that it's for free. It's also much less touristy because it's not as pretty or as tall as the other one, but it's still a good choice if you want a quiet and cheaper experience. And well, for the last day trip that I recommend would be doing some hiking in this area, and that would be the Grouse Mountain, which is spelled Grouse, And during the winter, you can ski or snowboard here, but if you come during the summer, you can also do some hiking trails and get to panoramic views of the city. If you want a challenging hike, you can climb the Grouse Grind. And this is going to be an intense but rewarding 1.5-mile uphill hike. And from here, you can see an incredible sunset. So if you're up for a hike, I recommend that you do it in the later hours and then you can fully enjoy these views. So there you have it, 10 places and 5 doors that I recommend doing in Vancouver. I hope that all of this information is going to create the perfect itinerary for this city. And if you like this episode, please share it with someone else who loves to travel and give me a review because this is going to help me a lot and it motivates me to give you more travel tips. Tell me in the comments if there is anything that surprised you about this episode, and I hope to see you next week because we're going to travel to the other coast of Canada to continue exploring more of its amazing cities. Enjoy your trip!